Hi guys, Craig Setzer with you, checking in, 9:30 now, and we're going to do an update and beyond until the 10 o'clock advisory comes in. I don't expect any big changes, but we have had some changes with Nicole as we've gone through the evening, so we're going to get to all of that, talk about it, talk about the implications with it as well. First off, a reminder, if you like the videos, and I see lots of likes there, I really appreciate that. Apparently it elevates our presence in the YouTube universe. But if you like the video, by all means, please click the like button, get the subscribe button to add to the channel's presence, and then the notifications. And one thing that I guess really helps is if you share it with your friends. So please share it with your friends. So while we are waiting on the 10 o'clock advisory, let's go ahead and just talk about what's going on here. And what I'm going to do is drop the crawl at the bottom of the screen there until we get the new advisory that comes in, so that once it comes in, it'll kind of populate that and we'll be able to see the latest there. So here's the overall radar image, and wow, you can see it right away, and it looks like a tropical storm, I'll be honest with you. It does not look like a hurricane, and as it has gone through the evening now, the radar appearance of the eye has been what looks like gradually growing. Now, I want to make the clear distinction here between what happened with Ian, which was it had a small, intense eye, and then it had an eye wall replacement cycle. And Ian nearly doubled its size and then intensified with that twice as big core that happened in late September when Ian hit the southwest coast. That is not what's happening here. The eye is just struggling to keep itself together, and I think it's just kind of coming apart a little bit, kind of growing. So from our perspective, this is really kind of a good situation here. This is definitely not bad news. This is something that we like to see as a storm is approaching land. We don't want it to be going through an intensification trend, and that is certainly not the case here. It is not intensifying. At 10 o'clock, we'll have to see the winds at the earlier advisory. The 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock were at 75 miles an hour, so just barely a low end category 1. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's the same for the 10 o'clock advisory as well. The pressure has been fluctuating a little bit. It came down a little bit. There was just a few minutes ago, Hurricane Hunter passed, and I will show you that because the Hurricane Hunters are in there now. Let me refresh this, and we'll take a look at that. So there it is, and you can see the pressure unchanged there was 982 in the first pass right there near kind of on the western side of Grand Bahama there. Now the center is over the water. It looks like it may be speeding up just a little bit, and clearly you can see that if you draw a line there, that is a west-northwest motion. Once again, reminding everybody, as I tried to emphasize, I don't know how many times earlier, it is not going to turn southwest. That GFS track was wrong. I explained earlier why I think it was wrong. And the GFS, I think, has a problem with high pressure. Blocking high pressure tends to want to stay too far away from that blocking high pressure, which is ironic because many years ago, the version of the GFS run then wanted to go into the blocking high pressure. So I think now we've got the opposite problem here. The GFS tries to stay too far away from the blocking high pressure, but that's another conversation for another time. So the pressure is unchanged, 982, 982. One of the things we can see here is that the wind field over here extends pretty far to the northeast, really far to the northwest, and these are what we call flight level winds. So these are the winds that the aircraft is observing at about 10,000 feet. On the south side here, the wind's not nearly as strong. They are strong, but they're not nearly as strong as they are on the north side. Now, one of the things that's going on, and I've talked to some of the other meteorologists that even actually fly in the Hurricane Hunters, is a thing called the reduction factor. And the reduction factor is that there's a typical formula for taking the winds at 10,000 feet and then calculating or reducing them to sea level, because the winds near the ocean surface are lower than the winds higher up in the atmosphere. And so there's kind of a reduction formula that we use, but it looks like the winds, the strongest winds, aren't quite getting down to the surface. Now that could change as we go through the evening here, that these winds that are hurricane strength higher up in the atmosphere do mix down or come down to the surface, but right now it's kind of right on the edge, and that's also not a bad thing. I don't know if I'm going to call it a good thing. We're just going to say it's not a bad thing, because as long as the hurricane is not, number one, contracting, number two, getting stronger, and number three, bringing those stronger winds down to the surface, to the water and the land eventually, that's not a bad thing. So we'll go with that as it is for right now. So that's basically the way the storm looks. So once again, back to the overall presentation there, you can see it on the radar. And let me kind of flip over here. We'll put the track on it. So there is the the previous track from this evening. This is from the each of the points here. Some of these are recon fixes, some of these are advisory observations here, but you can see after making that little bit of a jog to the southwest last night, which I'm sure made everybody go, but that was it. There was only just a few little wobbles here as it moved west across Great Abaco this evening, and now across Grand Bahama tonight. There's the center right there, and you can see it's moved to the west. That little line there, that is where the storm center should be based on the 4 o'clock National Hurricane Center advisory. And let me stop the loop here for just a second. So you can see it looks like, and I thought this was kind of happening earlier, the storm may be slowing down its forward speed just a little bit. So let's say the center, based on the way we're looking at this, is right in there, and there is where it should be. So maybe it's running a mile an hour or two slower, maybe a mile an hour slower. Is this going to be a big deal in the big scheme of things? No. If it was slowing down to a crawl, that would be concerning, because number one, it might be over the water just a little bit longer. It's not going to be over the water much longer. And two, if it slows down, then it kind of intensifies the flood threat from the rainfall flooding, and also could increase the storm surge flooding. I don't think it's slowing down enough to cause that. So we're going to keep that in the back of our mind, a little bit slower, but we don't think it is too concerning right now. So, and yes, one of the questions there, a little wobble. Yeah, there's been some little wobbles there. Those are not concerning, and there may be a few wobbles here as we go off to the northwest like that. Those wobbles are not going to change the direction of the track. Basically, it's still going to, if you kind of average out the motion here, it's going to be basically like that. So the southern edge here, and we'll kind of take a radar tour here, go to the northern edge first, and that line once again there, that little faint red line there, that is from the 4 o'clock advisory, where the storm is expected to be in 24 hours. So is it going to follow that track? It's going to be close to it, and kind of the thinking is that above that track, on the north side of that track there, where the center goes, the winds are going to be much stronger, considerably more intense, and on the south side of the track, they are going to be not as strong, because the storm is going to be kind of lopsided here, where we've got this pressure difference between higher pressure over the southeast U.S., kind of, if you want to call it this, compressing the air, although it's not really compressing the air, it's what we call a gradient. So basically just the slope is steeper of the pressure difference between the high and the low, which is Nicole, and that steeper slope creates the stronger winds. Let's keep it simple like that, okay? Don't want to get off the message here and pontificate meteorology. So let's drop to the south a little bit here, and there you can see the center there. There is the track, and it looks like it's pretty close to the track. It's just maybe running a little bit slower than the track. Really good squalls now coming in, really strong squalls coming in along the Treasure Coast, some as far north as the Space Coast there, and trying to get into Broward, but it has had a hard time getting into Broward. And by the way, I'm keeping my eyes on the National Hurricane Center here, so as soon as they put out their advisory, we will go to it right away and get the latest on it. Something else that's going on here that you might notice, and let me stop it once again here, and let me kind of center on the storm itself. I apologize for the radar sweeps there. I know they're a little distracting, but it's all the radars that are on, and I will know better and turn that off next time. So you can see that some of the brighter colors here, the reds and the yellows, they are a little bit away from what we would think of as the eye wall. The eye wall here doesn't have a lot of these higher reflectivity, technically is what it's called, stronger return signals to the radar. and that's a little bit odd. Now I don't know that it means that the winds are not as strong there, because the hurricane hunters have been finding that there is a wind maximum here, but it also appears that there may be a secondary wind maximum with stronger winds that are just about to reach the coast now, the treasure coast there. So a couple of things we're watching here. The fact that this doesn't have very high radar values there is, I don't think it's a bad thing at all. If we saw very intense radar reflectivities, radar values there in a lot of the reds, then that would probably be a sign of a little bit stronger, a little bit better organized, or even a strengthening type of hurricane there. So once again, there are the loops and getting reports. Thanks for the reports. Coral Springs getting some rain now. And let's see, yep, some cooler days after this. Wobble in the track, yeah, I talked about that. So let's continue to move along here. And there we are into South Florida here. And you can see in Miami-Dade, just a few little showers, especially in far north and northwest Miami-Dade there along the beaches. Broward getting a little bit of activity trying to push in here. But what's happening is as the storm is going to, it's about as close as it's going to get to South Florida in terms of its like closest point of approach. So basically, if we were to measure where the center is, to say Fort Lauderdale, it's about 90 miles away. In the next couple of hours here, it's still going to be, well, it'll be about 75 miles away. So it's getting close to its closest approach, and then later on tonight, it starts moving away again. So these rain bands that are coming out here, they're going to start having a little bit more difficulty getting farther away from the storm. And one of the reasons is because, and I'll show you on the satellite in a second, there's some dry air trying to work into the circulation. That's also helped disrupt this intensification trend. So all of these things are not bad things. In fact, I would like to think of them as favorable things. Let's do a quick, since I had the measurement tool out. So that's a pretty wide radar eye there now, about 60 miles across, and then we're going to say probably 60 miles to the south. I know it's a little bit open down here. We would call that open because there's no precipitation echoes right in the eye wall there. But 60 miles is bigger than it was before. Remember earlier today, if you were following, we were down to I think 28 miles across, and so that was the closest in terms of the tightest or smallest eye wall there. This bigger eye almost makes it seem like, and I'll show you on the satellite loop here in a second, it almost makes it look like that the storm is trying to go back to a subtropical storm, which is crazy. But we'll take it because it is not an intensification signal. It's not an intensification trend. Let's move along. Here's the satellite loop, and look at that. Does that look like a hurricane? And you can see kind of what we would call this warm region here. That's where the eye is. That's not really a true eye. It's more of just an area where there's not a lot of clouds, and so we're getting the warmer ocean temperatures showing through there. So this is not an intensifying hurricane by any means. Once again, I think the Hurricane Center, just for sake of continuity, would likely keep it a hurricane, because the last thing you want is a storm that's coming on shore and you've gone from 75 to 70 miles an hour and you've changed the prefix of the storm, and people are like, wait, it was a hurricane and now it's not again? So Hurricane Center very smart when they just kind of keep some continuity going on there. You can see this big band of thunderstorms rotating away from the center here, and that's going to try to work its way toward the coast there. So a real significant flood threat here, basically from about Palm Beach County all the way up through the Space Coast there, and that's going to be gradually working its way in as well. Here is that was supposed to be a satellite loop, but I think what they did was that was the mesoscale sector, and they changed that on us. Wind starting to come up offshore now. One of these buoys, this is well east of Kennedy Space Center. Winds are gusting to 60 miles an hour just off the coast there, gusting to over 50 miles an hour, or 54 miles an hour in the last hour. All these wind speed gusts are in the last hour there. You can see as well, I think that's Daytona Beach there. Daytona winds over 43 miles an hour, gusting all the way up close to Jacksonville, winds gusting to 44 miles an hour. And all down the peninsula, they're gusting as well. Even in the Tampa Bay area, we've got some wind gusts over 30 miles an hour, well over 30 miles an hour there throughout Tampa Bay. Around Kennedy Space Center, we've got winds gusting, and just south of there, that's probably Melbourne, gusting to about 47 miles an hour. And then farther to the south here, We've got winds that are likewise gusting pretty high, especially in Palm Beach County. We had a 51 mile an hour wind gust there at the Lake Worth site there in West Palm Beach. I think those are winds gusting to over 40 miles an hour. This site here, I don't know if it's gone down. This is a Settlement Point West End in the Bahamas, and what it was showing earlier was the eye wall of the hurricane went over it, and then the winds went from northeast, then north, and then northwest. In fact, I've got that. Let me see. I don't think it's updated, and I think that's the problem is we've lost communication with that site. So let me see. Let me show you that because there you can see a classic hurricane look to a weather station there. So the wind's building right there. The blue is the wind speed. The red are the wind gusts. And then we kind of got into this point here where we were having these close to 60 mile an hour wind gusts. And there's the pressure line, and boy, it just drops like a rock there. And then that's it for the data. So it looks like maybe we lost the communication with that site there over on the west end Settlement Point of Grand Bahama. So, and once again, that was this site right up there, which is apparently no longer reporting. So that is kind of the way things stand right now as we wait on the new advisory. Let me put the radar image back up, and then we'll kind of evaluate what some of you folks on chat are saying. And as soon as the advisory comes in, actually, you know what? Let's just take a little bit of a deeper dive here for just a second while we've got the time here. And I know I feel like I'm rushing because I'm waiting for the Hurricane Center advisory to come in. So storm surge has been a big problem up and down the coast, and I'm going to go into detail on that in a second. There is the risk of tornadoes from east central into northeast Florida along the coast. They're basically from about Martin County or where the center comes ashore to the north. This was earlier for the flood threat that extends up the east coast. I think that still exists. All right, let's talk about the surge thing now. These are the water stations within about the last hour or so. They're a little bit older now, maybe an hour and a half. And so we were coming into high tide there. This is Port Everglades, the site at Port Everglades. We were coming into high tide, and you can see that we're running about 2 feet above high tide right there. So now what's going to happen is because the wind to an extent is blowing on shore, especially to our stations farther north of the locations along the Treasure Coast and the Space Coast, that is going to hold this water up here. Even though the water's going to want to go out here, the wind is going to be blowing against it. So these tidal levels are going to be slow to come down. In fact, we've already seen reports of flooding around Fort Lauderdale. Of course, for those of you who aren't familiar, Fort Lauderdale has lots of canals, the New River, and lots of branches to the river, and very, very low. You fly into Fort Lauderdale or Miami for that matter, and you realize we are just right above sea level. So lots of reports of some flooding going in. And the thing is, you know, if you don't know the depth of the water level on the road, be sure to avoid it because you don't want to drive into a canal or something like that by accident. This is farther up the coast. This is the Lake Worth Pier. This is near West Palm Beach. And you can see there as well, running about 2 feet above normal. So this is within the storm surge warning area. And the values are verifying. The storm surge forecast was 2 to 4 feet there as well. And once again, the water is going to be a little bit on the slow side to come out. Let's go on up. This is Port Canaveral. This is by the Kennedy Space Center. And the water was coming up. And it's probably going to continue to come up. So it's certainly something that hopefully folks evacuated in the areas they were told to evacuate. I think it's going to probably continue to slowly rise there and then kind of counter that tide going out. And in fact, with the tide going out, and we're past high tide now, this is probably a better situation, not the best situation, but a better situation in terms of the overall storm there. So back to the radar here, and let's while we're waiting on that advisory, let's see what's going on, see what everybody's thinking out there tonight. I'm just getting set up for the new advisory for when it comes in. Let's see. So Cordova Road between 9th and 11th Streets closed due to storm surge flooding in downtown Fort Lauderdale, just east of Fort Lauderdale. Wilton Manors, A1A is closed from southeast 15th to Bayshore Drive due to storm surge flooding. Some of the reports that are coming in, that's Fort Lauderdale. Tarpon Springs reporting gusts up to, let's see here, 40 mile an hour wind gusts, 39 mile an hour wind gusts in St. Petersburg. Some of the reports coming in on the west coast. And Melbourne reporting, let's see, uh, Klondike Beach in Brevard County, wind gust of 60 miles an hour. All right, so the advisory is coming in. Let's go ahead and get to that, and then we will talk about what is going on closer to home and what's going on, I guess is what I'd say, in your neighborhood. All right, so here it is, and in just a second it will update with the text, so we'll be able to see basically the kind of the headlines and stuff like that. That'll pop up on the bottom of the screen. But this is the forecast advisory. You can see up there in the upper right, 10 p.m. Hurricane Nicole still winds at 75 miles an hour, moving 285. So 285. Remember, due west is 270. West northwest is 285, so moving west northwest, and the pressure pretty steady there at 980 millibars. There is the public advisory, and there's our crawl at the bottom of the screen. So changes with this advisory: the hurricane watch from Hallandale Beach to Boca Raton has been discontinued. So that means that Broward County is no longer under a hurricane watch. Broward County is only under a tropical storm warning. Basically, the hurricane warning, all the other warnings and watches remain the same. No other changes to anything. So hurricane watch for Broward County discontinued. Just the tropical storm warning remains in effect. In Miami-Dade, we have the wind advisory, but we don't have any tropical watches or warnings. The tropical storm watch was dropped earlier in Miami-Dade. All right, let's move forward here, kind of zip along, and you can see the yellow area here kind of represents, it's a loose, I'd like to say loose representation of the tropical storm conditions, or the extent of tropical storm conditions. This is typically something that works better with smaller storms, not huge wind fields like this, and it's also something that works better with storms that are over water, not over land. This product here that generates this tropical storm area, that is going to be revised next year. We should have a much better product. One of the things that they found when they were doing research is that it's over-exaggerated over land. So probably by next year, if we were looking at this, it might kind of not quite cut as much land there because of the friction of the land. So it might look more like something like that, and wouldn't have that part on it right there. So just improvements that are coming our way, things to look forward to there. All right, so let's go forward into time here. Once again, let me just reiterate. We talked about this a little bit earlier. This value here, I said we don't want the number to go down. We want it to go up. It's now going up. It's at 27.0. It got down to 26.5. That was about as far south as it got. And remember, that's the latitude. Latitude is north or south. Longitude, this number here, is east or west. This number is obviously going up because the storm is moving west, and this number on the right here going up faster than this number. But this number going up here for folks in South Florida, that's what we want to see. Unfortunately, it doesn't help folks in the path of the storm at all because it's not going up fast enough to cause basically Nicole to do one of these. Unfortunately, it's just going up to kind of make Nicole do something like that. So it's unfortunately so often the case with tropical storms and hurricanes that one community's good news is not good news for another community when a storm is heading towards land. So let's go forward into time here. There is the forecast position for tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. And I'm going to do it here. And all of those of you who watch, you know what I'm going to do. Does it matter? Here's the cone. I can hear you saying no already. Does it matter if you're in or out of the cone at this point? No. Why is that? Because the cone is only tracking a one-dimensional point. It doesn't represent any aspect of the size of the storm. In this case, the storm is much, much bigger than the cone, especially within 3 days. At 5 days out, at 4 days out, the cone does an amazingly good job of communicating where the storm is possibly going and who should be watching out. By 3 days, the message kind of gets close, depending on the storm size, and by 2 days and 1 day, the storm actually hurts the message, or the cone rather actually hurts the message, because anybody in Palm Beach County is saying, well, guess what, now we're out of the cone, but you're not out of the storm. And especially just north of the cone here, if you're say Melbourne or north up through Daytona Beach or any of these areas, you're definitely out of the cone, but you are by no means out of the storm. So that's my cone message. I know, unfortunately, all of you who watch it have heard it so many times. You could probably repeat it with me, but that's why I think we need a different form of the cone, and one of my suggestions was something like this. We'll see what happens. There is the hurricane conditions area. It's very small. In fact, the values are so low that we don't even see really a red area going here. Remember when we had Ian, we had a huge, unfortunately, huge red area that was coming onshore with Ian. That is not the case with Nicole, because Nicole's hurricane wind field, overall extent of hurricane force winds, is very, very small, and it hardly shows up at all. That's not to say that we're not going to see hurricane force gusts here in the hurricane warning area, maybe even some very brief sustained winds at 75 miles an hour, but this isn't going to be a big, a lot of people seeing Category 1 hurricane winds. That's not going to be the case. Let's go forward here. That's tomorrow morning. There's tomorrow evening, and still a threat for some gusty winds in the Panhandle. If you're in the yellow area, anywhere in the middle of the yellow area here, at some point in time, you're going to see some tropical storm conditions. That's winds over 40 miles an hour, gusts probably over 60. If you're on the edge here, in case with this graphic here, it kind of touches Broward, barely touches Miami-Dade, Alligator Alley there on the west coast. This area, these areas on the edge here are probably going to see winds gusting 45, but probably not tropical storm winds sustained, not 40 miles an hour sustained. So there's 7 p.m. tomorrow evening. Still doesn't matter if you're in the cone or not. Look at that. Northern half of the peninsula is out of the cone, but in the storm there. So pretty good winds here, though the winds coming down over time. We'll do a graphic to show you that in just a second. And then it weakens to a tropical depression, 7 a.m. That's the 7 a.m. position. In Georgia, you can see the tropical storm conditions abating there, ending. And then there's the Friday p.m. where it is now no longer a tropical system as it moves to the northeast. Quick look at the watches and warnings. So we know that the hurricane watch for Broward there is no longer. And what happens is that we have to wait for the National Weather Service office in Miami to release their version of the product, which covers the inland areas of South Florida, Palm Beach, Miami-Dade, and Broward. And once they release that product, then that little yellow area there orange area there will disappear. That's the hurricane watch area that, once again, is no longer in effect. Still in effect for Lake Okeechobee, still in effect for Palm Beach County. The tropical storm warning is still in effect for Broward. Tropical storm warning for much of the state, basically from Collier County to the north there, and all the way into Apalachicola, just about to Panama City, the Big Bend area there, as well as much of the middle of the peninsula, Tampa Bay area, and across northeast Florida, from Jacksonville all the way up to Charleston there. Hurricane warning runs from about Flagler all the way down to Boca Raton there. So that's where the hurricane warning continues in effect. Now at this point, if the storm were to start to weaken a little bit more, and it hasn't weakened yet, but if it were to weaken a little bit more, we're likely not going to see any of these watches or warnings change until the storm makes a little farther progress along and gets a little further along here. So there's the storm surge warnings, which I showed you some of those values there. The water levels are running very, very high, as well as in the Big Bend area and on the west coast there, basically from about Pasco County up to the north there under that storm surge warning. Some of the values are 2 to 4, maybe even up to 5 feet of storm surge. And remember, storm surge is what we call inundation, which is water that comes over normally dry ground. And so 5 feet, when we say 5 feet of storm surge or 5 feet of inundation, that is 5 feet over what would normally be dry ground. And that's not above mean sea level. You don't have to know what your elevation is. It's above your location if you're in that storm surge zone. Let's move along here and get this time of arrival. Now this graphic I kind of created because the storm is so big and it has such a big tropical storm conditions area. I wanted to kind of hone in on where the strongest winds and the possibility of power surges are or will be. The biggest possibility, there's going to be some power surges here or there, but this will be the more widespread where maybe some communities experience power surges, as well as some tree damage and maybe some minor home damage, residential home damage, and things like that. This is not going to be a situation where, unless you have a very, very not well-built home, you're not going to lose a roof in this. You may have some shingle damage, and I'm talking now to the folks Treasure Coast and up to the Space Coast, not Miami-Dade and Broward, but on up there. You may have some shingle damage. For those of you who shuttered, it's a good idea, especially northern Palm Beach north, because there's probably going to be some things blowing in the wind. The last time we had a hurricane directly impact the East Coast was 2004 in this part where we had Francis and Jean, back-to-back hurricanes. So it's been a while, so there's been some growth now to the vegetation, and so some things could come down and kind of blow in the air. So that's right now. Let's go forward here, and you can see the strongest winds, just these gusty winds here. These are the strong wind gusts that could produce the power outages, kind of crossing northeast Palm Beach County, Martin County, all of St. Lucie, Indian River, and Volusia County, and then moving on to the northwest there. And I apologize, I want to say that is Polk County and Osceola County there, but that might be Highlands County there. So it's been a while since I worked in Tampa, 23 years ago. My middle counties don't come to mind just as they used to. So there is 9 a.m. tomorrow. So through the night tonight and tomorrow, it's going to blow pretty good in that red area there. Just to the south of Orlando, through Polk County, on down to the south to just the northern part of Lake Okeechobee. Sebring is in this area as well. So these are the areas that will likely experience power outages that last more than just kind of a brief interruption, stuff like that. Let's go farther along here, and there you can see the storm is weakened enough where that's no longer an issue, and then farther out, that's basically it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to stop. I've got a recording going as well. I'm going to stop that.